वदनावदनाम्बुजे सर्वदा सर्वदास्माकं सन्निधिं क्रियात् श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानामालयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तः पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः विद्या विवेकेन पारं संसारवारिदेः प्रापयत्यनिशं भक्तान् तं विद्यारण्यमाश्रये अविद्यारण्यकान्तारे भ्रमतां प्राणिनां सदा विद्यामार्गोपदेष्टारं विद्यारण्यगुरुं श्रये भारती करुणापात्रं भारती पदभूषणं भारती पदमारूढं भारती तीर्थमाश्रये विद्या विनय संपन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदांत तत्त्वज्ञं विदुशेखर भारतीं. So a hearty welcome to all of you on behalf of Tattvaloka and the Guru Bandhava, Sringeri Guru Bandhava. We had a very auspicious occasion yesterday of our Sannidhanam's 28th Vardhanti day, and we had the talk on Atma Bodha, and following it up with another talk on this Sunday of the literary works of Vidyaranya Maharaj. So we have with us Lalit Gannavaram. Shri Lalit Gannavaram is from University of Texas, Austin, and he's turning 20 coming September. I'm reminded of this sloka, so which we all would have come across, at least 60 plus people would know this. Janani Janma Saukhyanam Vardhini Kula Sampadam Padavim Purva Punyanam Likyate Janma Patrika. So Janma Patrika we know is horoscope. So this is what it says. So for the welfare of the mother and the child, and for the growth of the family happiness, the position, the Padavim Purva Punyanam, the merits are accrued from the previous birth itself. So what do we say? So it's a graduation from the previous birth to the next birth is our actual this Janma. So that explains, so how much we must have done to graduate to this position, not just in the position of the, constellation, it is also the position of our Atma, how it has evolved over the different births. So this person, for a 20-year-old, has to be a Avadani, then he must be having the samskaras coming through different births and culminating in this, becoming an Avadani and able to do this with the blessings of our Sringeri Guru Parampara. Such is the greatness of this. I will not call him a kid, but he's a Pandit. Atma Vishaye Panda. So he is doing that. So what is Avadanam? So many of us had the opportunity to see this Avadanam taking place during the 60th Vardhanti of our Acharya. So many of us were there, and about 12 of them, and led by Dr. Ganesh, who is a Shatavadani also. And what is Avadanam? It is the multitasking at the same time. So we say, we are reading a book and somebody asking a question, we answer, and then, some music is going on in the background, we hear that. We think that is multitasking. But Avadanam is an act. If you just give an example of a Bharatanatyam recital or a vocal recital, it is all rehearsed beforehand, with the raga and the alapana and all the lyrics and everything. But this Avadanam is an entertainment for a literary person. So one who is deeply involved and has depth of knowledge in the literatures of our scriptures, Shastras, Puranas, and everything together. So it is attention at the same time. If you can understand a player playing chess, a player playing dumb charades, or who dares wins, if all these are put together, and a trivia, if all these are put together in the same show at the same time, what is the proficiency and the yogyata one should have? So that is why I recited that Meda Dakshinamurti Shlokam. So you need that Meda. Meda means, when people used to ask, So are you a Medhavi or Ashtavadani? So, you're able to do all this. But the Medha Shakti is so important for the Shatavadani, Ashtavadani or Shatavadani to have. And this kid who is turning 20 has it in him, who has done about 10 to 15 Avadhanams. And he started it with the blessings of our Acharyas, actually. And he also stayed in Sringeri to learn Vyakarna in 2019 and early this year. And he's the Sishya in Sanskrit. He does Avadhanam in both Sanskritam and Telugu. He's a Telugu speaking person from a traditional Telugu family. He learned his Sanskritam from Kutumba Shastri. Kutumba Shastri is a very household name with the Sanskrit fraternity, actually. And in the 5th grade onwards, he started learning his Vedam from Srinivasa Mallaprakada Garu, who is also a student of Yagya Subramanya Mama. So he comes from a strong background where they do, Nitya Karmas. Without doing that, they are not admitted, first of all, into learning Vedas, actually. So, and also Shastra teachers from different places. And the latest Ashtavadhanam he did was in few months ago in Rajamandri before the lockdown period. So we will ask Lalit Ganavaramji to start with his talk on literary works of Vidyaranya Maharaj. Thank you so much. Over to you, Lalit. Lalit?
Hariya?
Over to you, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namasabhabhyas Sabhapatibhyascha Vo Namaha. Vedandasyam Giram Devim Sadgurof Pada Pankajam Jagadgurunshcha Shringadrishthitan Vandertha Siddhaye Mala Sudha Kumbha Vibodha Mudra Vidya Virajat Karavarijataam Aparakarunya Sudhamburashim Shri Sharadambam Pranatosmi Nityam सत्यज्ञानसुखस्वरूपममलं क्षीराब्धिमध्यस्थितं योगारूढमतिप्रसन्नवदनं भूषासहस्रोज्ज्वलं यक्षञ्चक्रपिनाकसाभयवरान् बिभ्राणमर्कच्छविं छत्रीभूतफणीन्द्रमिन्दुधवलं लक्ष्मीनृसिंहं भजे शङ्कारूपेण मच्चित्तं पङ्कीकृतमभूद्यया किङ्करीयस्य सामाया शङ्कराचार्यमाश्रये प्रह्लादवरदो देवो यो नृसिंहः परो हरिः नृसिंहोपासकं नित्यं तन्नृसिंहगुरुं भजे श्रीसच्चिदानन्दशिवाभिनव्यनृसिंहभारत्यभिधान्यतीन्द्रान् विद्यानिधीन् मन्त्रनिधीन् सदात्मनिष्ठान् भजे मानवशम्भुरूपान् सदात्मध्याननिरतं विषयेभ्यः पराङ्मुखं नौमि शास्त्रेषु निष्णातं चन्द्रशेखरभारतीं विवेकिनं महाप्रज्ञं धैर्यौदार्यक्षमानिधिं सदाभिनवपूर्वं तं विद्यातीर्थगुरुं भजे अज्ञानां जाह्नवीतीर्थं विद्यातीर्थं विवेकिनां सर्वेषां सुखदं तीर्थं भारतीतीर्थमाश्रये विद्याविनयसम्पन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञं विधुशेखरभारतीं गिरां देवी वाणी विमलगुणिनो मे च पितरौ गुरुत्तंसाः मल्लाप्रगडकुलभूषा मणिबुधः कुटुम्बाख्यः शास्त्री रसिकहृदया ये सहृदयाः निजाशीर्भिः कुर्युः सफलवचसं मां करुणया अविद्यारण्यकान्तारे भ्रमतां प्राणिनां सदा विद्यामार्गोपदेष्टारं विद्यारण्यगुरुं श्रये. With namaskarams to the Jagat Gurus and our Guru Parampara. Namaskaram to everyone. Thank you to the organizers for organizing such a nice program. It's not every day that we get to talk about such illustrious divine figures like Vidyaranya Swami. And the time I'm given is an hour. The writings that Acharya did would take several lifetimes to explain. So that changes the gamut of this talk, as they say in Shiva Mahimna. Mamatvetam Varnim Gunakathana Punyena Bhavatah Punami. So there Pushpadanta says, it is not Bhagavan that I can accurately describe your Mahima with my limited speech, but more so that I may purify my speech by talking about a Sadvishaya like you. I will now compose the stotra. So kind of I find myself in the same boat, where it's not possible for me with my limited learning, and limited facilities and limited mental capacity to talk accurately and comprehensively about Vidyaranya Swami. But with what little time I have, I will do the best to do justice to the topic. So I hope that the elders listening will bless me in that endeavor. So Vidyaranya Swami is probably one of the most era-defining personalities to live in this millennium, even. So in the 14th century, so in the 1300s, he was born and he lived through the 1300s. At the time of his birth, Acharya's Purvashrama name was Madhava. So first of all, there is a lot of confusion about actually who Vidyaranya Swami was in his Purvashrama name. The names that we see most often are Madhava and Shayana. So I will talk a bit more about this maybe a bit later. But his Purvashrama name is Madhava. Before he took sannyasa, he actually had a younger brother as well. They were from a family in Ekashilapura or Varangal these days. The Acharya at the time, so the Jagadguru at the time was Shri Vidyatirtha, who was the 10th Acharya. And very interestingly, Vidyaranya so Madhava, Purvashrama, Madhava's younger brother was the first of the two to get sannyasa from Shri Vidyatirtha Swami. So even though he was younger, in Sanatana Dharma, jnana takes precedence over age, wealth, social status, over everything. So this family is actually a very good example of that. So Madhava's younger brother was actually given sannyasa before Madhava himself by Shri Vidyatirtha Swami. He became the 11th Acharya of the Sharada Peetham, and he was given the patta, the yoga patta, Shri Bharati Tirtha. So he became the 11th Acharya, and following that, in about 1331, when that happened in 1331, he gave sannyasa to his Purvashrama elder brother. So it's a very interesting way of seeing how things played out. Until then, even before sannyasa though, Vidyaranya Swami, so Purvashrama Madhava, was a very prolific writer, and the things that he wrote before he took sannyasa and the works that he wrote after sannyasa both have a very illustrious stature, and to this day are considered very high-level scholarly texts. So before I talk about the literature, I think it would also be good for me to mention the kind of political and cultural strength that Vidyaranya Swami brought to Sanatana Dharma. So as we all know, in the 1300s, Sanatana Dharma was under attack. So it was a tough time, both socially and culturally. Vidyaranya Swami understood that for this dharma to survive and for this dharma to thrive, it needed both a Brahma background as well as a Kshatriya support. So he felt that there was a need for a strong Sanatana Dharma based Samrajya to come up in the south. So as fate would have it, there were two young warriors, two young Kshatriyas, Harihara and Bukkarayas, who were actually in the south at the time looking to establish an empire. They found Vidyaranya Swami meditating in the Matanga hills, so close to Hampi. They took him as their guru. He also blessed them. It is said, legend says that he actually made a Suvarna Vrishti happen. A Kanakadhara happened for him, for Vidyaranya Swami too. The same way it happened for Shankaracharya in his childhood. So he was a Kamalambika Vidya Siddha. So he had done great upasana of the Devi Kamalambika. And with her grace, he made a Suvarna Vrishti happen, a rain of gold happen. And with that wealth, it's said that he jump-started their kingdom. So he set the muhurta for the city, which was named Vidyanagara in honor of him. So Harihara and Bukkaraya, they named it Vidyanagara after their guru, Shri Vidyaranya. And the planning of the city also was done on Shri Vidyaranya's council. So the city was shaped like a Shri Chakra. So circular with 9 gates, and in the middle, so where the Bindu would be in the Shri Chakra, that Bindu, that is where Shiva and Shakti both reside. That center point of the Shri Chakra is where actually the Hampi Virupaksha temple is. So this Vijayanagara Samrajya, it later became called Vijayanagara because it was basically undefeated. It did not lose very often, if at all. But its original name is Vidyanagara. So out of gratitude to the Acharya, to Sri Vidyaranya, who was the cause behind them founding such a strong empire, founding such a strong Samrajya, and giving them this success, the kings of Vijayanagara basically submitted all of their royal insignia to him. So their crowns, their robes, their wealth, everything they submitted and said, this is your prasada, Acharya, so this all belongs to you. And which is why to this day, the royal robes and the crowns that Mahasanidhanam Varu and Sanidhanam Varu wear during Navaratri Darbar are actually those of the Vijayanagara kings who submitted them to Acharyas as a token of their humility, gratitude, and Guru Bhakti. And to this day, we see the effects of Vidyaranya's helping starting the Vijayanagara Samrajya. Even in the Birudavali, we have the names Karnataka Simhasana Pratishthapanacharya. So the Acharya who laid the foundation for this Karnataka Simhasana, for this Karnataka Samrajya. Then we have Adirajadhani Vidyanagara Maharajadhani. So one whose capital city was Vijayanagara. So, and from then on, Sringeri Mathas started getting royal patronage as well. So it went from becoming a collection of small mathas to becoming a Mahasamsthana. So which is why, we have a Gajashala, there's a Gajapuja done generally whenever, even when there's special occasions. So there are certain Rajalanchanas, so there are certain royal favors that are still done as part of the Matha Sampradaya because of the foundation that Vidyaranya Swami laid for it. So not outside of his literature too, his work spans millennia and his work spans generations and is very much still relevant to this day. Now, if we come to the literary portion that he helped us, so he did give Sanatana Dharma that political support and that Kshatra support that it needed. But obviously, as is the case with our Acharyas, each of them is Saraswati in human form. So there is no limit to the quality and amount of literature it seems that they can compose over the course of their Peethadipatya. So Madhava, when Vidyaranya Swami was still in his Purvashrama as Madhava, he wrote prolifically on several Shastras. So Vyakarana, Tarka, Mimamsa, Jyotishya, Smriti, Shruti. He wrote a lot on those. Once he took sannyas and became Vidyaranya Swami, his rachanas, his writings mostly turned towards Vedanta. So first, if we look at in the Purvashrama, what all Vidyaranya Swami wrote. First, the Veda Bhashyas. Veda Bhashyas are probably the most important thing that Vidyaranya Swami wrote. It is very hard to write a Bhashya for even one part of a Veda, let alone do an entire, all of Rig Veda and all of Yajurveda and so on. Because to properly understand the Veda, you need to first have a command over the Vedangas. So you have Shiksha, Vyakaranam, Chandas, Virukta, Jyotishya. So you have all of these 6 Vedangas. So unless you understand these properly, it's very hard to understand exactly which Vedavakya is giving a Vidhi, giving a Nisheda, what exactly it's saying, how it's supposed to be understood, how it fits in with the Purvaparas, how it fits in with the Vakyas that are said before and after. So first of all, the very fact that he was able to write a Veda Bhashya and the fact that that Veda Bhashya surpasses all others in quality even to this day is one that is a testament to the fact that he must have been Sharada himself, Sharadamba himself. Outside of Veda, then Mimamsa also. So Mimamsa is Karmakanda. So the process of doing various karmas to get either Svarga or other phalas based on the Yajamana's desire. Mimamsa is very important, not just for the performance of karma. It's not, we cannot just remove Karmakanda as not necessary because of Jnanakanda. But especially from the Shastra standpoint, Mimamsa is very important in telling us how to properly understand a sentence. So they say, Mimamsa Shabdaha Pujita Vichara Arthaparaha. So Mimamsa is that which is used to arrive at the most honorable meaning, or the most agreeable meaning, or the most proper meaning. So basically, how do we take a sentence and interpret it correctly? Because Veda is not Paurushaya, it is not of human origin. So we cannot just try to understand it the way, if a human wrote it, we can go to the author and ask for clarification. We don't have that luxury with Veda. But we know that Veda is unfailing and will never be wrong. So to properly understand Veda, you need to write a certain set of rules, or you need to be able to analyze it correctly to make sure that the right meaning is being brought out. So we apply the same concepts even in Vedanta, even in Jnanakanda for that matter. For example, you have the famous Dvasuparna mantra, so Dvasuparna Sayuja Sashakha. So in that mantra it says there are two birds. So Veda explicitly uses the word Dva, the word two. So at first glance, it looks like this is a Bheda Parashruti. So a Shruti that is telling about Bheda, that Jivatma and Paramatma are different. But actually, if you apply the tenets of Mimamsa, if you apply the method used to derive meaning out of Veda, it actually ends up becoming an Abheda Bodhaka Shruti. It actually becomes a mantra that proves, or that is meant to depict the Abheda, the Advaita between the Jiva Chaitanya and Paramatma Chaitanya. So, like a simple example like this concept of Mimamsa and Mimamsa reasoning is very important to us, which is why he wrote two books, Jaimini and Nyayamala and Vaiyasika Nyayamala. So, Mimamsa is very much important to the Vedanta that he later wrote, and that is the end goal of all study for that matter. Aside from Mimamsa, so from Mimamsa, if we take even the karma portion, karma needs to be done in a specific place at a specific time. So time and place are very important to ensure that the karma gets the fruit that we want it to get. So he wrote a text called Kala Madhaviya, so that explains certain astronomical phenomena. Jyotishya is not astrology, it is astronomy, I think is a better way of putting it. So Kala Madhaviya is a very prolific work that he wrote that discusses these astronomical aspects and when to do karmas based on that. Aside from that, Dharma Shastra. So Dharma Shastra is one of the 14 Vidyasthanas, right? So we have the four Vedas, the 6 Vedangas, then Mimamsa, Nyaya, Dharma Shastra, and Purana. So these are the 14 Vidyas. So of these, Dharma Shastra is very important because along with Shruti, it forms the other half of Bhagavan's Ajnas. So Bhagavan says, Shruti Smriti Mamayevagni. So my orders are, so Veda and Dharma Shastra, these two are my orders. Dharma Shastra is also called Smriti. So what Acharya did here was, he analyzed the needs of the time. So he found that of the very popular Vedas, of the very popular Shrutis, Manusmriti, of course, is the most famous, and Yajnavalkya Smriti. So these two Shrutis are Smritis are the most discussed, the most commentated upon, and the most debated, and the most widely read for that matter. But there is also a Parashara Smriti, so they actually say Kalo Parashara Smriti. Some people have that viewpoint. They say that the proper pramana of Kali Yuga is Parashara Smriti for Dharmacharana. But he saw that there was a dearth of commentary on this. So Parashara Smriti did not have as much publicity, or maybe as much commentary, or as much literary tradition as the other two Smritis did, as Manusmriti and Yajnavalkya Smriti. So Acharya took it upon himself to write a thorough commentary, and he wrote two works. So there is Parashara Madhaviya and Vyavahara Madhaviya. So the Parashara Madhaviya basically talks about the Achara and Prayashchitta portions. So basically proper conduct, and a Prayashchitta is expiation for sins, for papas. So the Parashara Madhaviya talks about that. And then the Vyavahara Madhaviya talks about Dandaniti and Vyavahara. So Vyavahara is civil cases, Dandaniti is criminal cases. So there's a bit of law in this too, legalities as well, in addition to Dharma. So these two works put together form a very comprehensive and thorough explanation and description of the Dharma that has been laid out to us in Parashara Smriti. So by doing this, Acharya made sure that all Smritis have been accounted for, and all Smritis then have a solid foundation. Then he also wrote, there's a Madhaviya Dhatu Vritti, so a Vyakhyana on Panini's Dhatu Patha. So in the Dhatu Patha, all the dhatus, all the verb roots of Sanskritam are laid out. So Sanskritam has just over 2,000 roots, verb roots. And Actually, based on some Vaiyakarana's perspective, they say that the whole language can be derived from those roots alone. You don't even need nouns. From those verbs itself, you can build nouns and verbs and avyayas and build the whole language out of that. So these dhatus, these verb roots are very important. So they will tell you the verb root, the meaning, whether it's parasmayapadi or atmanepadi, set or anit. So these are all very shastric terms that are listed out, that are necessary for shastra, for Vyakarana shastra, that are listed out in that dhatu partha. And Acharya commented upon that. So even in Vyakarana, he has given us a very important text to read. So these are all shastras. Even Sangeeta, right? So something that's much more in touch with the common man to this day. Vidyaranya at the time, because Vidyanagara was not just named Vidyanagara for Vidyaranya, but also because it was quite literally the hub for Vidya. It was a great center of learning. So a lot of panditas and scholars and even artisans were there. So great poets, great sculptors, great dancers. So the arts also thrived in the Vijayanagara Empire. So Vidyaranya Swami saw though that the Sangeeta Vyavastha at the time, so the Sangeeta system at the time was not perfectly organized. So what he did was, at the time, he organized a meet among all the prominent Gayakas, among all the prominent Sangeeta Panditas at the time. And with them, he formulated a certain system for Sangeeta. And he wrote that out in a book called Sangeeta Sara. So actually the Melakarta system that we have today, the Janyaraga system that we have today, so the foundation for this was laid in that. And Venkatamaki and all these other Sangeeta Shastrakaras afterwards have built off of Vidyaranya Swami's work. So even when it comes to Sangeeta too, he has given us a great treasure and a great support for Sangeeta as well. Then after that, so these are all the Shastric works he has done: Nyaya, Mimamsa, Tarka, Vyakarana, Sangeeta Shastra, Dharma Shastra. So most of this was done in his Purvashrama times. So when he was still Madhava. After he took sannyasa and he didn't become Peethadipati immediately, but 1380 or so, 1380 to 1386, he reigned as the 12th Acharya of the Sharada Peetha. So in the sannyasa period, so the time before that, so 1330 he got sannyasa, so 1330 until his samadhi in 1386. That sannyasa period he devoted mostly to Vedanta. As I said before, the actual name, so the debate between Madhavacharya, Shayanacharya, and Vidyaranya is still not quite clear, but what Sannidhanam Varu told me is that Madhava and Vidyaranya are the same, and there is speculation that Shayana is Vidyaranya, as per what Sannidhanam Varu told me. So we will take that to be a Vedavakya. So the Madhaviya books that we have seen are mostly agreed upon to be those of Vidyaranya Swami. Shayana and Madhava are names of his disciples as per Sringeri Matha's records. So Vidyaranya Swami's name in his Purvashrama was Madhava, his Yoga Pattanama, so his Sannyasanama was Vidyaranya, and he had two disciples, Madhava and Shayana, that he entrusted his unfinished bhashyas to. So he did most of his Veda bhashyas, did not finish them, and gave them to them to finish. Which is why even though we are in doubt about whether Shayana Bhashya is written by Vidyaranya Swami or Shayanacharya, we still treat it with the utmost reference and treat it as if it was written by Vidyaranya Swami, because in the Guru Parampara, that caliber is maintained, and it was partially written by Vidyaranya Swami as well. So when it comes to Veda Bhashyas and Vedanta Bhashyas, that's kind of the academic spectrum that we're talking about. Vidyaranya Swami's most prolific text in Vedanta, the most important text, and the text that is a precursor to the Prasthanatrayi study. So the way it works is you do some Prakarana Granthas first, and then you move on to the Prasthanatrayi study in Vedanta. Prasthanatrayi being Brahma Sutras, Upanishads, and Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. Panchadashi is a very important bridge that is traditionally studied between the two, because it is very Shastric in nature, but it still maintains the easy language style and the easy explanation method of Sanskrit shlokas. So it's not really written in prose the way bhashyas are. So Panchadashi gets its name from the 15 chapters. So it has Panchadasha adhyayas, or Panchadasha khandas, or vyasas. So Panchadashi has 15 chapters split into 3 fives. So the first 5s are Vivekas, the middle 5 are Deepas, the last 5 are Anandas. So in the first 5 chapters, he talks about Viveka, so discrimination between Atma and Anatma. So Panchakosha Viveka, knowing that the Atma is separate from the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya koshas. Avastha Viveka, so knowing that Atma is separate from the 3 avasthas, from the Sharira Viveka, so from the 3 Shariras. So these first 5 adhyayas talk about the Viveka aspect of Vedanta. And the middle is called Deepa. Deepa is literally that which illumines. It discusses the nature of Chaitanya and Drikpadartha. More about this Drikpadartha later. And the last 5 talk about Ananda, so Brahmananda Mimamsa. So it talks about Brahmananda. Acharya's explanation in this is remarkable. He takes very complex Vedantic and Upanishadic topics and not only puts it into a shloka, but he puts examples too that are very easy to understand for us. So one example that strikes my mind is Shmashrukantaka vedhena balo rodati tat pita chumbatyeva na tat pritir balarthe swartha eva sa. It's actually quite a cute shloka too. There's this one mantra bhaga in Brihadaranyaka. It's a very famous one. Yajnavalkya Maharshi is instructing Maitreyi. He says, Nava are Maitreyi, patyuh kamaya patif priyam bhavati, patif priyo bhavati, atmanastu kamaya patif priyam bhavati. And he goes on, Nava are sarvasya kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. So the whole thing goes on like that. Nava are vedanam kamaya vedah priyam bhavanti, atmanastu kamaya vedah priya bhavanti. So like this, there's a whole sequence. He says, basically, Maitreyi, let's take the example of the husband or pati, right? So the pati is not dear to the wife because of love for the pati. The pati is dear to the jaya, the wife, because of the pati's love of atma. So it is this priti of atma that causes us to have priti towards something else. So this is kind of a hard topic for us to understand, right? So how does us deriving enjoyment from something else, or us having a liking towards something else, come from a liking we have towards ourselves? It's somewhat of a hard topic to wrap our minds around initially. But the example Vidyaranya Swami gives is very simple and very beautiful. He says the father kisses the child. So we've all had this experience before, right? So the father, obviously, the child is very cute. It's his child. He loves it. And so he goes to kiss the child. The problem is that the father has shaved maybe a week ago and he still has that stubble growing. And the beard stubble is, Acharya uses the word shmashru kantaka. Shmashru is the beard and mustache region. Kantaka is a thorn. So that beard portion, when it's newly shaved, is prickly. So when that sharp beard pokes the child, the baby starts crying, right? Because the baby is very, small baby, very cute, probably very soft cheeks. So when the father's rough beard touches or pokes the baby's cheek, the baby starts crying, right? But the father still kisses the child. Chumbatyeva, he says. He does not desist. He does not cease to kiss the child. And he says, so where does that preeti come from? Nasa preetihi balarthe. So this love is not for the child then, because if the love was for the child, the father would have stopped when the child starts crying, or he would not do it again if he knew that the child cries. But the father does it again out of love for the child, but because he likes it. So swartha eva sa, swarte eva sa preetihi, Vidyaranya Swami says. So because is his child, and he derives pleasure from kissing his child, the love that is derived from the Atma aspect, from his own aspect, is what is imposed on the child. So we say that Brahman has 3 Swarupas, right? Or the Swarupa manifests in 3 different lenses. So either as Sat, as absolute existence, as absolute consciousness, Chit, or as Ananda. So it's the Ananda aspect of our own Atma that we see imposed on other things, and we think that the Ananda comes from that other Vastu or the other experience. But it does not. It is a facet of our own true nature as Shuddha Chaitanya, as Atma. So as you can see, this is a relatively meaty topic to grasp, and there's a lot of explanation done in this portion of Brihadaranyaka for Bhashyas, in the Sarvasya Atmanastu Kamaya Sarvam Priyam Bhavati, is a very famous quote too. But to explain it with such a day-to-day example, and to do it in such an obvious way that now anyone that reads that one verse can now recall what the purport of that Veda mantra is and understand its implications, is something that can only be done that cannot be done unless you go to the Anubhava stage. So the difference between just Shastra Panditas and our Acharyas is that Shastra Panditas only talk about Vedanta from the Shravana Manana standpoints. So they've studied it, Shrotavyam Shrutivakebhya, they've studied it from the Vedas, they have studied Vedartha, they have studied the logic behind it, they've done the Tarka and Mimamsa behind it. But when it comes to Acharyas, they live in the realm of Nididhyasana and Anubhava. So they not only just study this, they are, past the best in terms of the Shastric aspect of these elements too. But when it comes to our Acharyas, they live this life. They live experiencing the truths that are read about in these Vedas. So when a great enlightened soul like Vidyaranya Swami writes a text like this, it is quite frankly no wonder that there is so much clarity and so much ease of expression when it comes to explaining even these somewhat complex Shastric terms. So Panchadashi is renowned for its ability to explain these complex philosophical prakaranas, these philosophical trains of thought in such easy ways. As I said, Panchadashi finishes off with the Ananda, so the 5 adhyayas discussing Brahmananda. So there is this other work called Jivan Mukti Viveka that is also written by Vidyaranya Swami. It is generally taken to be kind of like an appendix or a supplementary text to Panchadashi, because it then talks about the state of a Jivan Mukta. So this Jivan Mukta concept is one that is unique among Vedanta. So there are several branches within the Vedanta darshanas, right? So we have, of course, our Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Shuddhadvaita, Dvaitadvaita, Bhavadvaita, all of these are there, Shivadvaita. But this concept of Jivan Mukti is one that is unique to our Advaita Sampradaya. For all other Sampradayas, moksha in Vedanta, moksha is only gotten either once you leave this body or once you go to another loka, right? You either go to Vaikuntha or Kailasa. Moksha is only attained then. Whereas in Advaita, we have this concept of Jivan Mukti, where you can attain moksha sthiti while you are alive itself. Once this body is left, you then attain Videha Mukti. So Jivan Mukti though is still a moksha sthiti. So this concept of Jivan Mukti is explained very elaborately in this book, Jivan Mukti Viveka. And mainly he talks about sannyasa. So sannyasa, of course, there's the ashrama sannyasa, of course, in which you formally renounce all karma. In Shankara Sampradaya, you even remove Shikha Yajñopavita, because Yajñopavita is your arhata to do Vaidika karma, and Shikha is a symbol of doing Agnikarya. So by taking off Shikha and Yajñopavita, you are basically symbolizing that you are renouncing all ties to worldly karma. So we take off that too in sannyasa, in the Advaita, in the Shankara Sampradaya. And in addition to that, there's of course the mentality of sannyasa, right? So Bhagavan says in Gita, Kamyanam karmananyasam sannyasam kavayo viduh sarva karma phala tyagam, right? So the renunciation of all karma phalas and desisting from all kamya karmas and only doing nitya and naimitikas as and when they come. So this definition of sannyasa is also one that is agreeable to us from the mental outlook standpoint. So within this sannyasa, there are 2 types of sannyasa again. So in the ashrama, there is vividisha sannyasa. So Acharya is discussing all of this in this text. There is vividisha sannyasa and vidvat sannyasa. So there is the sannyasa, there is the renunciation of karma and karma phalas and karma karmas and all of that, when there is still vividisha. So vetum ichcha is vividisha, it's a san pratyaya. The desire to know is called vividisha. So when you are a sannyasi and you have renounced everything because you are focusing 100% on jnana marga, that is called vividisha sannyasa. In this stage, there is still vidhi and nishedha, there is still do's and don'ts, because atma jnana has not attained yet. Then there is vidvat sannyasa. So vidvat means one who has one who has attained knowledge. So once brahmajnana has been attained, the mode of sannyasa switches from vividisha sannyasa to vidvat sannyasa. And at that point, right, the famous thing comes, ko vidhi, ko nishedha. What vidhi is there, what nishedha is there. The do's and don'ts melt away because the do's and don'ts come with the body. And they have transcended the stature of this body. But it is a point to note that acharyas still behave as per the vidhi and nishedhas, even though they have transcended them. Why? Loka sangrahamevartham. To show us the way, to remind us that we must act on vidhi and nishedha. Acharyas too, though they have attained the Jivan Mukta Sthiti, and though they have they live in the realm of Vividisha Sannyasa, they still follow this Vidhir Nishedhas. But anyway, the Vidvat Sannyasa and Vividisha Sannyasa are two very important topics that are described in Jivan Mukti Viveka. Then another very, very famous, very, very important book is called Drik Drishya Viveka. Again, this is another very potent topic in Vedanta. So just as the Tarkikas and the Vaisheshikas have done their Padartha Vibhaga, right? So Naiyayikas have Shodasha Vibhagas, Tarkikas have their own Padartha Vibhaga. In Vedanta, we split everything into two Padarthas. So this whole world is classified into two realms, Drik and Drishya. And doing Viveka, so discriminating between the two, knowing the difference between the two, is the subject matter of Drik Drishya Viveka. So not the Mangalacharana Shloka, but the first verse of the work is basically a good summary of what Acharya is trying to convey in that. So Rupam Drishyam, Drik is then Lochanam. And then Tadrik becomes the Manasam. Then Drishya Dhivrittayo, and then Sakshi Drigevatu Nadrishyate, he says in the Mangala, in the first verse. So this Drik and Drishya are two very distinct things. So the definition of Drik is Swapragashatve Sati Svetara Sarva Avabhasakatvam. So though it is self-effulgent, though it is self-evident, self-illuminating, it not only illuminates itself, but it makes sure that things around it too are illumined. Drishya is paraprakashyatvam drishyatvam. So being illumined by something else and having no self-illuminating power that is inherent is called the drishya. So drik means sight, drishti, that the seeing, and drishya is that which is seen. So Rupam Drishyam. So Acharya takes us in a cycle. Rupam Drishyam, Lochanam Drik. Rupam Drishyam, Lochanam Drik. Tadrishyam Drik tu Manasam, he says. So first thing that is seen, right? What is an object of sight? A Rupam, right? A form. So Lochana Gochara Vishayaha is Rupa. So that which is that sensory input that is taken through the eye, through the Chakshurindriya. So now the Rupam is being seen and the seer is the eye. Now, what makes the eye see? Because we are also perceiving the eye. The eye is not self-evident. So what is making the eye perceivable? Manasam, the Antahkarana, the Manas. Then we are also perceiving the Manas though. So what makes the Drishya Dhivrittaya? So all these Dhivrittis. Vrittis are the different forms that our mind takes as it goes on to different objects. So all of these different forms of the mind, or all of these different changes in the mind's form, are all also perceptible. They're also all seen. They're perceived. They're not self-perceived. They're not self-perceived. They're not intrinsically perceivable. So what then becomes the drik there? So he says it is just called drik there. So he says drigeva. It is just called drik. That drik padartha is sakshi, he says. The drishya dhivrittayaha sakshi drik at that point. So the drik is the sakshi chaitanya, the pratyak chaitanya, that is Paramatma's consciousness that stays within and incites the mind, right? So even the mind is said to be different from the Atma. There is that famous statement in Vidyaranya, Anyatra mana abhuvam. So he says basically, you though the eye is open, you say that my mind was elsewhere. I did not see anything, right? So that means that there is something that is making the mind work as well. And that we have taken to be the Sakshi Chaitanya, to be Atma. So basically, Acharya leads us through this process of discriminating between what all these drishyas are. So first, Rupam is drishya, and the Chakshurindriya is taken to be drik. So Rupa has been classified into the drishya category. Then we take this Chakshurindriya. This too has become drishya because it is perceived and not intrinsically, but the thing that perceives it is the manas. So we have then also put this Chakshurindriya into the drishya category. Then we have this manas, that is drishya, that is drik. Then we perceive this manas too, so it goes into the drishya category. And then you have the drik, the sakshi chaitanya, that is the drik, that is the sight that is used to perceive it. And then drigevatu na drishyate. Now this has no more regressions, right? The sakshi chaitanya does not have anything that is perceived because it is swaprakasha. It is self-effulgent, self-evident. So through this process, Acharya leads us through discriminating between the drishya, prapancha and drik. So the siddhanta of Advaita is दृग्दृश्यौ तौ पदार्थौ द्वौ परस्पर विलक्षणौ दृग् ब्रह्म दृश्यं माया स्यात् इति वेदान्त डिण्डिमः Bhagavad says in Vedanta Dindima Stotra. So there are two things in this world, drik and drishya, and they are paraspara vilakshana. They are mutually opposing. They have opposite lakshanas. And the drik is said to be Brahman and the drishya is mithya, maya. So this is a very important concept for us if we want to have proper viveka and discrimination between what is atma and anatma. So this whole text of Drigdrishi Viveka is geared towards that. Then of course Vidyaranya Swami has also authored several Upanishadic things. So there are Upanishad Deepas, they're called. So there are 6 Upanishad Deepas. He has written bhashyas on Aitareya and Nrisimha Uttara Tapani Upanishad. So these Tapani Upanishads are sets of Upanishads that discuss Upasana Vidhanas. So methods of doing Upasana of various deities. Nrisimha Tapani Upanishad stands out because it is geared towards explaining Narasimha Upasana, but it does so in a very Advaitic way. Like it is explaining the Upasana in such a way that is geared towards Advaita. So Bhagavatpada wrote the bhashya for the Nrisimha Purvatapani Upanishad, so for the first half. For the Uttarardha, Vidyaranya Swami wrote a bhashya. The Uttarardha of that bhashya too is very interesting. So there is an Anushtupa mantra for Nrisimha, the 32-lettered mantra in Anushtup Chandas. And basically what Vidyaranya Swami does is, he takes the mantra, applies it to the Devata Nrisimha. Then he takes the mantra and shows how it applies to Nirguna Paramatma. Then he takes that same mantra and shows how it applies to the Jivatma, so the Jiva Chaitanya. And by showing that, in the end, he shows how the Devata, Paramatma, and Jivatma are one and the same via that one mantra. So that's why this Nrisimha Uttaratapani Upanishad Bhashya is actually a very important one. It's a lesser known one, but the fact that even Bhagavatpada chose it, he only did 10 Dashopanishad Bhashya and only 1 or 2 Upanishads beside that Acharya even deigned to comment on. So this Nrisimhatapani Upanishad is a very important one philosophically, and Vidyaranya Swami has given us a commentary for the Uttarardha of that. So thus far we have discussed Vidyaranya Swami's Shastra works and his Vedantic works. Now comes probably one of the most important things he wrote, if not the most important. So he wrote Shankara Digvijaya. Madhaviya Shankara Digvijaya is called. So he probably wrote this in his Purvashtama. There are several Shankara Digvijayas. Many people have sung the tales of Bhagavatpada and his, illustrious 32 years of life. So, Ashtavarshe Chaturvedi, Dvadashe Sarvashastravita, Shodashe Kritavan Bhashyam. So the time scale of Acharya Bhagavatpada too is mind-boggling. By 8 years, he had finished study of all 4 Vedas. By 12, he had finished study of all the Shastras. By 16, he had written the Prasthanatrayi Bhashyas. And by 32, he had put the Chaturabhnaya Pithas in place, several Upapithas in place, the Shri Chakra Pratishthas in several places, refuted Bauddhas, refuted Purvamimamsakas, established Advaita as the Paramatatparya of Shruti, and he had left this body in a mere 32 years. So, that is a divine career. Bhagavan himself, Dakshinamurti himself, has taken the form of Shankaracharya to do that. So it is no wonder that his charitra has been a popular vastu, katha vastu for several Digvijaya kavyas over the last centuries. But Vidyaranya, so the Madhava Shankara Digvijaya, Madhaviya Shankara Digvijaya stands head and shoulders above those others in terms of poetic beauty, in terms of its shastric callbacks, in terms of the way it narrates things. Vidyaranya Swami's Shankara Digvijaya is the one to read, and therefore the one that our acharyas read for Shankara Jayanti to this day, and the one that traditionally is done Parayana of for Shankara Jayanti in traditional circles as well. So I thought I'd discuss some of the more beautiful aspects of that too. First of all, his Vaidushya, Acharya's like Shastra Panditya and Vaiyakaranatva comes out in this. He does a lot of aprasiddha prayogas, a lot of very complex grammatical structures. So the pratigna he actually takes in the beginning. He says, रूक्ष एकाक्षरवाङ् निघण्टु शरणैः रूक्ष एकाक्षरवाङ् निघण्टु शरणैः. So starting off he says, I will be using a lot of words that you will not find except in ekakshara nighantus. Ekakshara nighantus. So there are some words that we say one letter carry meaning, right? So like akaro vishnuvachikaha, like the letter a means Vishnu. Something like ka means Brahma. The word, some letters like this are called ekaksharas. So ekakshara nighantus are very complex and it's hard to find words from them. So रूक्षैकाक्षरवाङ् निघण्टु शरणैः औणादिकप्रत्ययप्रायैः हन्तयङन्तदन्तुरतरैः दुर्बोधदूरान्वयैः क्रूराणां कवितावतां कतिपयैः कष्टेन कृष्टैः पदैः हा हा स्याद्वशगा किरातवद वितते रेणीव वाणी मम. He says, so I will be using these ekakshara nighantus. Then aunadika pratyaya prayehi. So these unadis are a section of word derivations where it is not, there are a lot of Vaidika prayogas are given in that. A lot of derivations for several Vaidika prayogas are given. So Laukika prayogas are given in the rest of Ashtadhyaya and Siddhanta Kaumudi. So the Kridanta Prakarana and the Tadhita Prakarana, those are all used in more day-to-day things. They're more readily available. But these unadis are a more complex way of deriving words. So he says, I will use a lot of these. And then, Avanadika prayehi hanta yanganta danturatarehi. These yangantas are a very special form of verbs. So when you have one verb and you make another verb out of it, those are called sanadis, or there are certain ways to do that. But this yangantas are ones that are kind of hard to do. So visheshena atishayena va punaha bhavati iti bobhuyate. So the word bhavati, to be. So one that exists again and again, or exists to a very great degree, that verb is transformed into the verb bobhuyate. Or I think a better example is nrityati. Nrityati means to dance. So adishayena va punaha nrityati iti nari nrityate. So dancing again and again, or dancing in an excellent way, is called nari nrityate. So this is a very advanced and a very refined prayoga, vyakarana prayoga to do. So he says, I will do a lot of these as well. And then as if these prayogas, so as if the grammar aspect of it wasn't hard enough, he says, durbodha duranvayehi. They will be hard to understand, and duranvayehi, you will have a hard time putting it together. And then he says, Kruranam kavitavatam katipayih kashtena krishtaif padaihi. So those of you that study Sanskrit can understand the beauty of the phrasing of this line actually. So the katipayih kashtena krishtaihi. So only a very few people who have very cruel poetic thoughts will be able to actually pull out these words from my speech. So he says, in the end there, he gives a very beautiful simile too. He says, my speech, so my poetic method, my grammar is thus very harsh and very hard to go through. But the katha vastu, the poetry that I'm saying, is very delicate and soft. So he compares it to kirata vitatehe erni iva vashaga. So just like a deer that is tied up by hunters, he says my speech has been tied up by my rough and tough speech. Vidyaranya Swami says. He said that, but a lot of it is very pleasant to the ear, and a lot of it is also easily understandable. He does do a lot of Vyakarana Prayogas as well. One of the most famous shlokas in this Shankara Digvijaya is the one that describes Shankara Bhagavatpada's Avatara Prayojana. So, Ajnana Antargahana Patitan Atma Vidyopadeshaihi Lokantratum Davabhavashikha Tapapapachyamanan Muktva Maunam Vatavitapino Mulato Nishpatanti Shambhormurtishcharati Bhuvane Shankaracharya Rupa. So at that time, everyone had fallen into Ajnana. So they say Bodhas were very prevalent then, and actually Vidyaranya Swami himself writes, Shrute Pidhati Shrotre Kraturit Yaksharadvaye. If they heard the two words kratu, meaning yajna, they used to close their ears as if they heard something sinful. So the devatas come and beg Shiva to rescue them. And he says that the people at the time then were Bhava Dava Shikha Tapa Papachyamanan. So this Papachyamana is actually the Yanganta that I was talking about earlier. So Pachyate means to be boiled, to be steamed, to be burnt. And these people are being papachyamanas. So they are being basically burned and boiled again and again and again. So birth after birth after birth, they are being burnt by bhava davashikha, by the wildfire of samsara. So to rescue those people, what Shambhor Murtihi. So one form of Shiva, what it did was Muktva Maunam. So it set aside the Mauna that it is characterized by, the Mauna Vyakya that Dakshinamurti does, that Dakshinamurti is famous for. He set that Maunam aside, meaning he came to speak, and Vatavitapinaha Nishpatanti, it descended from that banyan tree, from that Vatavriksha that it sits under. So that form of Shiva now walks this earth as Adi Shankaracharya, and for that matter, to this day, as our Acharyas, because Bhagavad Pada writes in his Mathanashasana, or Mathamnayanashasana, he says all of the Acharyas in my Pithas afterwards are not, my disciples. They are me, myself. They are my own forms. So for that matter, we can say to this day that Bhagavan Dakshinamurti walks the earth as our Acharyas, as Mahasanidhanambaru and Sannidhanambaru. So this is a very famous shloka that talks about how Bhagavad Pada was Dakshinamurti himself. Then there are certain parts of the text that bring back a Shastric column. So a very beautiful part is when Acharya is looking for Mandana Mishra to debate. So Mandana Mishra, who later becomes Sureshwara Acharya after Sannyasa and the first Pitadipati of our Sharada Pitha. So when he goes there, he asks the Udaharya, the people, there are some maids there that are fetching water. He asks them, where is the city's Maheshmati? He asks them where Mandana Mishra's house is. And they tell him an answer. Kirangana yatra giram giranti dwarastha nidantara sanniruddhaha janihi tanmandana panditokaha. So you will come across parrots having a conversation in the gavaksha, in the dwara. So in the doorway, you will see parrots in a cage having shastric debates. Know that is Mandana Mishra's home. So basically, parrots only repeat what is said in the house, right? Parrots repeat what they hear. So saying that these parrots are also having Shastric debates is a testament to the fact that there is always Shastra Vichara, Shastra Goshti going on in Mandana Mishra's home. And there he writes 3 shlokas, and these last 3 lines, Dwarastha Nidantara Sanniruddha, or Kirangana Yatra Girangiranti, Dwarastha Nidantara Sanniruddha, Janihi Tanmandana Panditokaha. These 3 lines repeat in those 3 shlokas. The first line changes. So in those, he puts the questions that the parrots are debating about. So, Jagad Dhruvam Syat, Jagadadhruvam Syat is one. Is the world eternal or transitory? Swataf Pramanam, Parataf Pramanam is knowledge. Is Jnana self-evident, or is it? Does it need to be corroborated by something else? Then Phalapradam Karma Phalapradojaha. Does karma itself give the fruit of karma, or does Bhagavan give it? So why these 3 questions though? These 3 questions are the questions that most darshanas used to disagree upon. So Nyayas, Nayayikas, Vaisheshikas, Sankhyas, Purva Mimamsakas and Uttara Mimamsakas. The Yoga Darshana does not really debate much with anyone. They are a separate thing that everyone more or less agrees with usually. But for example, this Phalapradam Karma Phalapradojaha, does the karma itself, does the performance of karma itself give the karma phala, the fruit of karma, or does an Ishvara have to dispense it? The Mimamsakas say that karma itself gives the fruit of the phala, right? So that's why they say that Nitya karmas can give pratyavaya without, because of this fact, right? So Nitya karmas will give a papa called pratyavaya, akarane doshaha. If you don't do it, you will get papa. If you do it, you may or may not get something, but if you don't do it, you will get papa. Such karmas are called nitya karmas. So only if karma is self-sufficient in giving the karma phala can something like this happen, is the logical sequence that they put out. We as Uttara Mimamsakas do not agree. We say that there is a Paramatma, or an Ishvara, that is karma phala pradayaka, that dispenses the karma phala. In the same way, Swataf Pramanam, Parataf Pramanam. So when cognization happens, not jnana like Brahma jnana, but just in mental processes when cognition happens, Nayayika says Parataf Pramanam. So that knowledge needs to be, the verification of a knowledge occurring needs to be verified by another source. Whereas in Vedanta, we do not agree. We say that it is Swataf Pramana. Mimamsa too agrees with us. Purva Mimamsa also agrees with us on that count. So in this way, Jagat Dhruvam Syat, Jagadadhruvam Syat. Of course, a lot of people say that this world is Paramarthika Satya. We don't agree. We say it's Vyavaharika Satya. It's not absolutely real. It is transitory. So these questions are the questions that drew lines between different bhedas, between different matas, between different darshanas. These are what they used to debate about to come to the bottom of things. So the fact that the parrots are repeating these shastras or these shastric debates is Acharya's way of telling us that not just Purva Mimamsa, but several shastras were debating within Mandana Mishra's house, and they picked this up. Then this is kind of the shastric aspect of Mandana Mishra's poetry. Then if we come to the poetic aspect, he does this one stotra. He writes one stotra as told by Shankaracharya. So he describes Shankaracharya's travels through Bharata Desha. So like Andhran Anugrihya Savenkatachalesham Pranipatya Upajagame Vidarbharajadhani Atha Nijapad Saroja Sevanaye Swayamagatya Tathandran, he says, right? So he went to Venkateshwara, he did Namaskaram there, then he went to the Vidarbharajadhani. From there he went to Kanchi, did Shri Chakra Pratishtha there. So as part of his travels, Bhagavatpada goes to a temple, a Harihara temple. So there Vidyaranya Swami writes a very beautiful stotra as told by Shankaracharya of 10 shlokas. In each shloka, it is a double meaning shloka. So these days we have trouble writing shlokas with one meaning. Vidyaranya Swami wrote an entire stotra with 2 meanings. So it's a Dashavatara stotra. Each shloka will carry one meaning about an avatara and one meaning for Shiva. The same shloka will be interpreted 2 different ways. So for example, in Matsyavatara, he says, Vandyam, the Meenavataram one goes, Vandyam Gamadarena Kalayan Anadim, Gamadarena Kalayan Anadim, Mainam Maha, Kinchana Divyamangi Kurvan, Vibhurme Kushalani Kuryat, he says. So there is this Mainam Maha, a Vibhu, may that God, may that deity, may that Bhagavan, Naha Kushalani Kuryat, may he give us Kushala, may he give us Bhadra. Mainam Maha Somakala Vilasi. So each word here is Vandyam Maha Somakala Vilasi. Each word now can be interpreted 2 different ways. So first, Vandyam. Vandyam means that which should be prostrated to. So that is normal. You can take that aside. Then Maha Somakala Vilasi. So by Shiva's meaning, Maha Somakala Vilasi. So Maha great, Somakala, the crescent moon, Vilasi. So that Vilasaha, that which delights, that which rejoices with the Chandra Rekha on the head. So Shiva. From Matsyavatara's meaning, Maha Somaka Lavi Lasi. So Maha is great, Somaka is the Somakasura that Matsyavatara killed. Lavi, Lunati means to cut or to break. Therefore, Lavi means breaking. And then Lasaha means sport. So one whose Leela was cutting or destroying Somakasura. So Maha Somakala Vilasi for Shiva means he who has a Chandra Rekha. For Matsyavatara, it means that which sported in the killing of Somakasura. Then Mainam Maha Kinchana Divyam Angi Kurvan. So this is even more beautiful. It says that it took upon a Mainam Maha. So for Meenavatara, Meenasya Bhavaha Mainam. So the nature of a Meena, of a fish, is Mainam. So for Matsyavatara, Bhagavan Vishnu took upon fishness. Mainam Maha Divyam Angi Kurvan. He took upon the form of a fish. For Shiva, how does it work? Mena's daughter becomes Maina. And when you apply that to a Maha, so a Tejas, it becomes Mainam. So Mena's daughter is Parvati, right? So Himalaya and Mena Devi, their daughter was Parvati. So Shiva Angi Kurvan, this is called Chvip Pratyaya. So Anangam Angam Karoti becomes Angi Karoti. So to make an Anga is Angi Karoti. So not just accepting. So for the Matsyavatara meaning, it meant that he was accepting Mainam Maha. Here, for Shiva, it literally means he made it an Anga. He made it a limb because Shiva gave Parvati half his body as Ardhanarishvara. So Mainam Maha Angi Kurvan means he made his Anga, that Tejas that came from Mena Devi, meaning Parvati. So may that Vibhu give us Kushala, give us welfare. Like this. Also the Nrisimhavatara one. So Surad Dvishat Kunjarama Jaghana Prahladamullasidhamadadhanam Panchananam tam Pranumaf Puranam Samavahan Kesaritam Varamyah Suradvishat kunjaramajagana prahladamullasitamadadanam panchananam tam pranumah puranam. So he says, Vayam pranumaha. We do namaskaram to a panchanana. What kind of panchanana? Kesaritam samavahan yaha. So that which samavahan bore Kesaritam varam. So for Narasimha, Kesari is a lion. Kesarita is lioness. So Kesaritam varam samavahan. So one that took upon a great or a very illustrious lioness, right? Because he took upon lioness for the top half for his head for Narasimhavatara. For Shiva, you need to break this up in a different way. K Saritam Varam. So K, I told you he would use Ekaksharani Ghantus, right? So in the Ekaksharani Ghantu, Ka means Shiras, the head. So K in the head, Saritam Varam. So Saritam becomes Shashti Bahuvachanam, the genitive plural. So of the rivers, Varam, the greatest being Ganga. Samavahan. So one who bears the greatest of rivers, Saritam Varam, K on his head. So Samavahan, K, Saritam Varam. So this is the breakup for Shiva. For Narasimha, it means one who took upon lioness. For Narasimha, for Shiva, it means one who bears the greatest of rivers, Ganga, on his head. Kesaritam Varam Yaha Suradvishat Kunjara Majaghana. He who killed Suradvishat Kunjara. Suradvishat means the enemies of the Devatas, Rakshasas. For Narasimha, Suradvishat Kunjaram. So these suffixes like Kunjara, Simha, Vrashabha are used to indicate greatness, right? So like Kapi Kunjara is used for Hanuman because he is the greatest among Vanaras. Or Nripa Shardula, Raja Shardula, Nara Shardula we hear, right? So the greatest among humans is Nara Shardula. So certain animals' names are added, tiger, elephant, bull. So certain animals are added to indicate illustriousness. So like that here, Suradvishat Kunjaram. So the greatest among Suradvishat, the greatest among the Rakshasas, Hiranyakashipu, he killed him. Ajaghana, he killed him. For Shiva's, Suradvishat, who was a Kunjara. So the Rakshasa who was an elephant, Gajasura. So Shiva killed Gajasura and took Gajasura's skin, right, that hide, and made it his clothes and became Krittivasaha. So Charmadharaha. So for Shiva, it means the person who killed the Rakshasa that was an elephant, Gajasura. For Narasimha, it means he who killed the greatest among Rakshasas, Hiranyakashipu. Then Prahlada Mullasita Madadhanam. This is very straightforward. For Narasimha, it means he who held Prahlada in his lap, who was happy. For Shiva, he took Prahlada in the meaning of general happiness. So one who instills happiness in his devotees' hearts. We do namaskaram to that Panchanana. This is again beautiful. Pancha Anana. Shiva has 5 faces, right? Sadyojata, Vamadeva, Aghora, Tatpurusha. So these 5 faces, Sadashiva. So these 5 faces we have for Shiva in 4 directions and up top. So therefore Shiva is Pancha Anana, Panchanana. Nrisimha Swami is also Panchanana because Pancha means Vistarane, that which expands. That's why this Prapancha is also called that, because this world expands from its Avyakta state. So the lion is also called Panchanana because it has a very gaping maw. Its jaws open very wide. If you've seen a lion yawn, like our mouth only opens this far. A lion's mouth will open until here. So because lions can open their mouths very wide, lions are also have a name. They also have a name, Panchanana in Sanskrit. So we do namaskaram to that Purana Panchanana, that lion that is primordial. So to Narasimha. In this way, as I hope you have seen, Acharya in the Shankara Digvijaya has melded several things together. So very nice storytelling and an engaging method of storytelling, several shastric elements that can teach us a lot about what our viewpoints are in certain matters, poetry of the highest level. So Shankara Digvijaya is a masterpiece, and one that even Mahasanidhanam Varu and Sannidhanam Varu have told us all to do samparayana of regularly. So Vidyaranya Swami has written that too. So his entire literary works span from those Jyotishya, Vyakarana works that I talked about in the beginning, to Mimamsa in the middle, to Vedanta Granthas, and then to these poetic works, to these other vrittis and bhashyas that he has written. Sureshwara, so there's Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Acharya Shankar Bhagavatpada wrote a bhashya on that. Sureshwaracharya wrote another text on that called Bhagavad Bhashya, or Brihadaranyaka Bhashya Vartikas. He wrote 10,000 verses. Vidyaranya Swami wrote a composition on that, condensing it into 5,000 verses. So there is a book on a book on a book on a book that Vidyaranya Swami wrote. So he took a lot of care to make sure that things were explained well for us, that to make sure that things were explained in a pleasing way for us, to make sure that for different people he explained in different ways. Panchadashi teaches in one way, Drigdarshi Viveka teaches in one way, his Bhashyas teach in another way. So he has the trademark mercy of an acharya. He has the trademark daya of an acharya that spurs them on to do such writing, even though they don't need to, even though they're beyond karma. He showed us that daya for us to become liberated from the samsara chakra and to get shreyas. And Vidyaranya Swami and our acharyas to this day follow in that same footsteps. So when our acharyas in Darbar during Navaratri, when they put on that crown, and when they put on those royal robes, those are the same crown and the robes that Vidyaranya Swami wore when the Vijayanagara kings offered them to him. Not just that, but our acharyas to this day wear the same crown of Daya and Jnana that Vidyaranya wore. So that parampara, our parampara has been copied, has been passed down almost perfectly. My teacher actually used to say, I told him once in the middle of Partha that I wish I could have seen Shri Abhinava Vidyatirtha Mahaswami. I wish I could have seen him. I'm fortunate to have seen Mahasannidhanam Varu and Sannidhanam Varu, but I expressed to him that I wish I could have seen Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam Varu. He said, have you seen Mahasannidhanam Varu? I said, yes. He said, then you have seen Jyeshta Mahasannidhanam Varu too. Because in several paramparas, and especially in our Sringeri parampara is preserved exactly. Sannidhanam Varu does everything. His movements, even the way he speaks, the way he carries himself, is exactly how Mahasannidhanam Varu did it. And Mahasannidhanam Varu's conduct, his qualities, his all of that is exactly the way Shri Abhinava Vidyatirtha Mahaswami Varu did it. So in that way, our acharyas have been as illustrious as the next in terms of our parampara. So we have seen how illustrious Vidyaranya Swami is. And our acharyas today are in that same parampara, at the same level, at the same caliber. So it is our fortune to be able to do namaskaram to them, to be able to think of them, to be able to be their devotees, to be able to be their shishyas. So let us pray to them that we can keep talking about them, keep speaking about their daya, and keep being their devotees in this life and the next. So they say, Devastu Parameshwaraha, Sutram Sharira Mimamsa, Acharya Shankaracharya, Santu Janmani Janmani. So I hope that the Shastra I study in every life is Vedanta. I hope that I worship Bhagavan in every after thinking about Vidyaranya Swami. So with namaskaram to the Guru Parampara, to Lakshmi Narasimha, and with thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity, I will stop here. श्रीमच्छङ्करपादयोः अर्पिता तेन देवेशः प्रीयतां मे सदाशिवः मङ्गलं स्तम्भडिम्बाय मङ्गलं मृत्युभृत्यवे मङ्गलं सत्त्वेन यद्धन्ति रजः सत्त्वतमो गणं शृङ्गशैलचरं नौमि जगद्गुरुपदाम्बुजम्.
Thank you so much, Lalit Ganavaramji. Bharati Karunapatram, Bharati Padabhushanam, Bharati Padmarudam, Bharati Tirthamashraye, Vidya Vinaya Sampannam, Vitaragam Vivekinam, Vande Vedanta Tattvagyam Vidushekhara Bharatim. So we seek the blessings of our Guru Parampara, illustrious Guru Parampara. So we see right from Adi Shankara to our Sannidhanam, we see the same taken over again, over and over again, in terms of tradition, in terms of their knowledge and Atma Vichara and their realist selves, actually. So thank you so much for your talk. It was a very interesting talk. It was not just interesting, it was very informative. And if we have the time to listen to you, we can go on and on and on. So with the American accent, but with your perfect spashtata and saralata of your Sanskritam, we enjoyed it thoroughly. And you took us through the literary works, just the glimpse, but at least we could get something out of it from his your Drishya Vivekam. You explained it so well. And the allegory from the Panchadashi of this, father kissing the child was beautifully done again. And selective verses from the Shankara Digvijayam was done so very well. And then the Nikantu Shloka that you spoke about, so was also very nicely done. And if only we have the time, we can do it, once more, little longer session maybe. And then we are bringing Lalit Ganavaramji back again on the 16th of August for his Telugu talk now on our Narasimha Bharati, Sachidananda Shivan Narasimha Bharati Swamigal's Narasimha Bhujanga Stotram, Prayatam actually. Bhujanga Prayatam of Narasimha Swami Stotram. And on August 15th, we have Raja Ram giving the second talk in Tamil. So if we have to sort of give some praise to this Telugu speaking and literate person from Andhra, so we have to recall this shloka or verse of Apaya Dikshitar. Apaya Dikshitar was a great Mimamsaka and also was a Tamil Smarta. So he came to Andhra to do his Vidvat Sadas, where all those people who gathered were Yajurvedis, actually. And he was a Samavedi. So he says, Andratvam Andhra Bhasha cha Prabhakara Parishramaha Tatrapi Yajushi Shakha Nalpasya Tapasaha Palam. So he was in praise of this Telugu speaking, sort of Panditas there, so well versed in Mimamsa, not just in the Kumarala Bhatta school, but also in the Prabhakara school also. So we have to give such a praise to this Telugu speaking Pandita from Andhra, now living in United States, but gliding very easily from one work of Vidyaranya Swamiji to the other one. So we seek the blessings of Amba and Acharyas for you, for your welfare, for your Atma Jnana, and the act of Avadanam also. Avadanam is an act, but Atma Jnanam has to instill all these things. So we thank you so much, and we look forward to your Telugu talk on the 16th of August. Now over to you, Swami. Thank you so much. August 15th is our talk in Tamil by Sri Rajaram. So in the meanwhile, please follow us through this Guru Saparya sessions 5 times a day, multiple time zones. I'm sure many of us are benefiting across the continents. Thank you so much. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.